This is New England Soccer Weekly with Tom Quinlan, Nick Giuliano, and Mike DeSilva on 790 The Score.
Well, I really don't know what else you need to see at this point. I mean, the embarrassment, again, another week where you're just completely just taken apart on the road.
Can we at least ease the people into it a little bit?
No, I'm not. I will not let this go, that this did not have to be this way. What we're looking at with the New England Revolution right now is shocking. 3-0 down against Nashville to start.
3-0 again.
To start the first half. Now you can come back, finish it 3-2. I don't care. This team is shot right now. I can't buy in to whatever Alexi Lawless was trying to sell me about some playoff run last week. It's over. It's time to move on to 2024. And now you're going to ruin Jacob Jackson's confidence and throw him in against a Philadelphia team that certainly has something to prove this weekend. Again, it didn't need to be this way. And if you're not apoplectic at this point about what has happened to your New England Revolution, then I don't know what to tell you anymore. Mike, Nick, guys, how are you?
Doing great. Mikey, how are you?
Apoplectic.
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 Yeah.
So use that in a sentence, or not in a sentence. Can you spell that rather?
I am so apoplectic I could put my fist through a wall.
Let's
apoplectic.
not do that.
A-P-O-A-P-O.
Plectic.
P-L-E-C-T-I-C. Apoplectic.
Steve, can you pull that up?
Yeah, at some point we need
No, here we go. A-P-O-P-L-E-C-T-I-C. I definitely didn't get that right. It's okay. I have dyslexia. It passes. I still knew what the word meant at the end of it.
Fair enough. And I didn't, so you got me on there.
So listen, I've said this all season. Your goal is to make the playoffs.
Okay.
That goal has been made. Have we seen great soccer over the last 2 months from this team? I can't say that to be the case. And I will say this, and I know we have a guest we're going to bring. I want to pick Danny's brain on this as well. Last week, listen, obviously I'm the positive glass half full guy in this show.
Which I appreciate. I wish I had the empathy you do in
because,
life.
Well, again, as a player, this is what you do. Like, right, every game, everything's not going to be perfect for the full 90, but your objective when you start the season is to make the playoffs, to give yourself a chance at MLS Cup. That's what the Revolution did. What I've said on this show is you want to see them playing well into the playoffs. That hasn't really come to fruition. But what I saw last week in the third goal gave me pause. And it's because when I go back and look at this team and you look at the first goal, it was a mental mistake, right? You look at the second goal, you can point to a certain thing.
Okay.
The third goal is pure effort. And that is something that I haven't seen from this team all year. The third goal going into stoppage time, where it was a counterattack from Nashville, and you look at that replay, and there's players jogging back, and you're down 2-0, and you have one of the best forwards in the game streaking up the field, and you see all this yellow coming, and there's no blue.
With a rookie in net.
I go, that one to me, I go, uh-oh. But I will say, on the other side, you come out in the second half, you score 2 goals, you give yourself an opportunity to get a point there. This team, again, it isn't playing great, but they're not getting blown out. And outside of that third goal, I think the effort is still there and the talent's there for them to do something. To win the whole thing, I think it would be crazy to think so, but we'll see.
I think getting out of the first round, especially if you're playing against Columbus, would be crazy to think so. But let's go over it with it.
I don't think it's crazy to think.
Well, let's figure it out.
All right.
Danny Higginbotham is Manchester-born, Manchester Red. He's also...
Love that, by the way.
Yes. And it will always be Manchester till he's dead. He's also...
also another tough team right now. Rough.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah.
But... one of the lead voices, color commentators on Apple, and also one of the voices on the Premier League on NBC.
Free game this weekend.
Make sure you watch it on Apple, 6 o'clock, the Revs and the Philadelphia Union. Danny, welcome to the chaos in Providence.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting chaos. It seemed to be more glass half empty than half full. So it was interesting to listen to what you had to say there.
Glass half empty?
I think there's 2 ways to look at it. I think you can look at it from both sides of things. I think the fact that your home record obviously got beat at home by Columbus, but your home record has been excellent. Yes, there's been chopping and changing. I think the biggest issue at the moment is that I don't know whether the manager knows his best team or his best system. So I think what you have to do is you have to go back to basics. you have to go back to a system that the players know all about, because that's what they did last weekend. And a lot of people go, oh, yeah, well, you know what? New England came back in the second half and they were far better. I think you have to take into account that Nashville took Zimmerman off at halftime. And I think Schaffelberg as well, he was causing huge problems. But I think what you saw in the second half was a group of players that I thought looked a lot more comfortable in the system they were playing, probably playing 10, 15 yards higher up the pitch, and they all knew what their role was. And I think at the moment, for this team, simplicity is genius. And if you can get the right players playing in the right positions, then you have an opportunity then to move forward again in the playoffs.
But why does that seem to be such a difficult thing for Clint to figure out? Obviously it took a whole half when the game pretty much was out of reach at that point. Isn't there some type of prototype or blueprint that this team in the first half of the season, before everything hit the fan, isn't there something to look back on and be like, okay, this is what we should be doing?
I think so. I would agree 100%. But I think in any management, in any team in the world, when a new manager comes in, they want to put their stamp on the team. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to continue what the other manager left, because then it's not necessarily seen as, right, this is my team. And we've seen the changes. We've seen obviously Polster at times playing as an inverted fullback. We've seen them go to wing backs. I think that the fullback situation has made life a little bit more difficult. But now, obviously, this weekend, you have Jones back, which I think is obviously huge. You have the potential, if you wanted to, someone like Farrell, could he play in the fullback position, which he's done before? So you have the opportunity now to go to a back four, and I think that favours the team. And you look at a player like Chancellor as well. He played up front last week against Nashville. For me, you play him on the left wing, and he's a player that can drift into that centre forward position because he's a real special talent.
Well, I want to get to Chancellor, and I want to talk about the back four in a second. But to the point that Mike's making, to follow up on that, there was no reason to break the system that you had with Bruce. I understand what you're saying. Every manager wants to come in and impose their system. Yeah. But technically, whether it be Richie Williams or Clint P.A., they're system guys. Why would they, who are already in the system, they know what's going on, they know the style that Bruce wants to play, it's high risk, high reward that this team plays. Why would they think deviating from a system that had this team second place in the league despite all of the injuries before League's Cup, why did they think they knew better?
I don't think it's the fact that they thought they knew better, but what I would say is that at every club, if you have a manager, you have an assistant manager, you have another assistant manager, it's the manager that's always going to make the calls. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the assistant manager, the first team coach, whatever you want to call it, necessarily would say that is his philosophy. So I think when you look at it with Bruce Arena at certain times, like you say, it was very much risk reward. At times they would go man for man all over the pitch. But I think now what you're seeing with Clint PA is more of a fact of he wants to defend spaces rather than go man for man. So straight away, if you're a manager that sees it like that, then you have to change things. Now, in my mind, do I agree with that? No. If something isn't broke, then there's no need to fix it. But I'm not a manager. I've never been a manager, probably will never be a manager. So until someone's in that hot seat, it's very difficult because I do feel as a manager, you want to become your own man. So therefore, when you take the reins of a club, it doesn't matter who it is, whether you're taking over a successful club, you want to make small specific changes. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's right, but what I feel has happened is that as we've seen the progression with Clint PA, I think one of the things is that I think the players are getting a little bit confused because I've had 3 managers twice in a season in my career. And it was the 2 times I got relegated from the Premier League.
Yeah,
because
it's a good point, Danny, and that's kind of where I was going with this, to have you expand on that. You as a player, you're doing 3 different. You're hearing 3 different philosophies with multiple different formations, and then you're changing your philosophy with like 3 or 2 games left in the season. As a player, that has to be a difficult situation on the field.
It's huge. Off season, it's not a problem because then you can go and spend a whole preseason doing it. You can iron out the things that aren't quite right. But when you're asking a player to sort of change the way that he sees the game mid-season, or even more so now towards the end of the season, it can become difficult because there's a comfort blanket for players. Players, when they go on the pitch, they what they need to know and what they want to know, what's expected of them, where they're supposed to be. You have free spirits like a Carlos Heel, special players that you just say to them, listen, you go and do whatever you want to do. We will find you. But even in recent weeks, I think we've seen a frustration from him where all of a sudden, if I'm a defender from the opposition and I'm seeing him 30, 40, 50 yards away from me, I'm delighted. And I think because the frustration set in, he's started to drop a little bit deeper as well. You've not necessarily got centre forwards that are willing to stretch the game. So the whole emphasis and the whole dynamics of the team changes. Then a player who would ordinarily find himself in a certain position finds himself in another position which becomes alien to him. So I think from my side of things, from the outside looking in, this weekend against Philadelphia Union, you have to go back to basics. You have to get the right players in the right positions, knowing that they know exactly what's expected of them, because this is a huge game this weekend. You know, if New England were to get the right result, they could actually end up finishing in, let me get this right, they could actually end up finishing.
Fourth. I think if Montreal beats Columbus and the Revolution beat Philadelphia, then they'll jump to that fourth spot.
Yeah, but they can, just let me look at my notes because I've been writing it down because it's interesting. New England, let me get this right. New England could actually go, if results went their way, New England can go third.
Which would be
so if they win by 3 goals or more, which is obviously a tough task against Philadelphia Union team, and Columbus don't win, then all of a sudden, you know, it becomes very, very advantageous for New England because we know they're one of the best teams at home in MLS. So there's a lot to play for. It's a stretch, no question about it.
But it could happen.
You know, I think it's some. Yeah, and I think that will be on the player's mind. And, you know, I don't watch New England every single week. I don't follow them as intensely as you do. So I'm sort of from the outside looking and I'm thinking, right, okay, this could potentially happen, but it could go the other way and then you could potentially finish 7th. So there's so much.
Now, Danny, let me ask you this, as obviously, you know, you mentioned you've been through a few managerial changes in, you know, your playing career. At what point does the influence of, you know, a captain like Carlos Heel or some of the veterans on the team, at what point do they kind of step in, not as like a siege, you know, to overthrow the manager, but at what point do they step in and say, hey, you know, maybe we're overthinking this thing. Maybe we need to just stick to what got us to this point to begin with?
I think what you'll find is that any new manager that comes into a club, whether they've already been within the club or not, they will speak to the senior players. They'll say to them, you know, okay, I see it from my side as a manager, as a player. What do you see? What are your thoughts? What do you feel as though we need to do? But it's a fine line because what you have to do, and I've seen it on both sides. I've been at clubs where a manager's come in, asked players' opinion, gone and done exactly what he's wanted to do, and the players have got really annoyed. But I've also seen the other side where managers have come in, asked the players what they want to do, and then done everything that the players want to do. And it can go wrong there as well. So it's about getting the right balance. What a manager needs to do, he needs to take obviously the opinion of the players, but the final decision has to be the managers. Or any not power, but any seniority. Yes, you do. You set a bad precedent. And I just feel that, like I say, I look at tomorrow's game, and the concerning thing for me for New England is that they don't know their best team and they don't know their best system, and it's the last game of the regular season. Now, what you need tomorrow is to look at it and go, right, this is the system that we are going to play. If things start to go wrong, we still have to maintain this. We still have to stick to this system because this is what we're going to need going forward. Then you have a little bit of time where you can concentrate then on working on that system, because I just think at the moment we've seen a back 3, we've seen a back 4, we've seen inverted fullbacks, we've seen 2 up front, we've seen 1 up front. I think you now need to set on a system and go about it tomorrow. And then if there's mistakes that happen within that system, then you have the following few days to say, right, let's have a look at this and let's just try and fine tune it a little bit more.
What makes this game so hard for me to think that they're gonna, I understand, your perspective. You're on the outside looking in, but and just for us, being here every week, what's making it hard for me is that, I don't see them identifying a system going into the playoffs, especially when you're now throwing in a Revs 2 keeper in Jacob Jackson, and having him to be in net with a defense that is,
questionable at best at these past couple weeks.
Exactly. And
haven't been healthy, but still,
the players back
but you
there,
still
the
have Dewan.
formation,
He's
just like
talking
Danny
about
said, it's been tough. It's been a lot of change.
You have Kessler back now. You have Romney. You can move Farrell to right back. You don't have to sit Farrell as long as Farrell's healthy. Ryan Spalding, for some reason, once Richie Williams and Clint Pierre came around, Ryan Spalding went by, just disappeared, especially under Clint Pierre. So, adding in all of these factors defensively, I just think they're going to be on the back foot so much this weekend, and they're just going to. I see Philadelphia just coming in here and dominating because I just can't see them finding that identity right now. No matter what, it's just it's so,
it is.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to do that in such a short period, and I think Philadelphia Union are a prime example of an identity. At times we've seen them play with a back three this season. At times we've seen them obviously play with a back four, which has been their favoured system for a long time with the diamond. But regardless of anything, their philosophy doesn't change. How they play, whether it be a three at the back or whether it be a four at the back. You can probably, if they were to line up on the pitch and just had plain shirts, you would probably know that it was Philadelphia Union within 5 minutes of watching them. But that is something that, obviously it was a situation a lot of the time under Bruce Arena as well, but now things have changed. So what you have to do, I think you have to, the simple fact is you have to go back to basics. You have to make sure that defensively you're strong, because one of the things I noticed against Nashville, the turnovers and the restarts of play, they switched off. They ended up conceding from a throw when a cross came into the box. And then I think the third goal just before half time, New England were actually on the attack. Yeah, they were on the attack. Now, they are things that the one thing I would look at, not great to watch and really poor goals to concede, but they are things that can be rectified very, very easily. And I think what you have to get now is a group of players. And this is what I'm talking about when at times plays can be confused. I felt like against Nashville, when the team was attacking, it's sort of the whole team was attacking and they weren't really thinking about the defensive side of the game. So what you have to do is say, right, if we're gonna play three at the back, if we're gonna play four at the back, whatever it is, put the right plays in the right positions and make sure that when you're on the attack, the defenders can't affect that play. So you have to then make sure that you concentrate and you can organize. And there's enough organizers within that team to be able to do that. I just think that what you find a lot of times, and I saw this myself when I was playing either as a senior player or as a younger player, when the team is doing well, when the team is chugging along nicely and you're getting the results, a senior player can take care of his game as well as other players' games around him. When the team isn't doing well and individual senior players are not performing to their potential, they can't look after other players. So where you would normally have organizers in a team, all of a sudden those organizers can go a little bit quiet because they're just concentrating on themselves. So you need to get back to this collective now, because for me, when they were pressing Nashville last week, when they were trying to win the ball back, it wasn't collective. It was going in ones and twos. And if you do that, you get picked off. And before you know it, the opposition are able to turn defense into attack. So I'm sure that's something that the team has potentially been working on this week.
I think it's a great point about defined roles too, because if you go back and watch,
spacing has been awful in some, especially in the counterattack.
Absolutely, and the second goal, which was Omar, if you go back, I made this note, and you pause the replay at the 29:52 mark, you see Surridge in the middle of Romney and Omar, and nobody taking accountability for anybody. But I think that goes back to what we're watching it like. How is no one picking it up?
Yeah.
But I think Danny makes a good point. It's because in week 33 or game 33, they're still trying to figure out
there's no
who
shape.
is where.
There's
it's tough.
And we've seen it even on counterattacks. We've seen it with Farrell a couple times where there's a hesitation, and it's a lot of times because they're making up ground for somebody who's not where they're supposed to be. And I feel like it happens so frequently to them on the counterattack, which obviously they like to play, like you just mentioned, their fullbacks like to play a little bit more aggressive out on the wings. And if they're not tracking back fast enough, you're almost dead in the water there.
What's amazing is it's not necessarily anything new. You know, as I said before, this is a team that's been playing high risk, high reward.
But they've had the consistency. They've understood their roles up until recently.
Right, and that breakdown makes just no sense. Like how we've gotten to that point for sure.
Well, it doesn't. It makes no sense, but it makes a little more sense.
The way he lays it out,
I think
sure.
Sure,
but it's just like
you look at
back to basics.
go back to basics,
Absolutely.
which is an interesting tagline in game 34.
But is Clint PA going to go back to basics? As he brings in Todd Ramos here, who has MLS coaching experience, are they leaning on Todd Ramos now more, right? Because when you think about it, Todd is the only guy I think that, let me double check this, but I'm pretty sure Todd's the only guy that really has any real MLS coaching experience, head coaching experience on that coaching staff currently.
At the moment, I would assume so. I mean, everybody else is
because PA was coming from Revs too. After
as far as head coaching experience,
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Danny, let's go back to Philadelphia though, because this is a matchup that the Revolution I think are ironically looking for a spark heading into the playoffs, but this might be the way that they're playing right now, they meaning Philadelphia, maybe the worst opponent to play, because all of the weaknesses that the Revolution have had over the last 2 months, this is how Philadelphia plays with Gazdag and Carranza up front. They counter, they have a great triangle. It's going to be a tough matchup.
It is. I don't think there's any question about that, but what I would say, you can flip it over the other way and go, right, if New England were to get a result in this game, what that's going to do for their confidence is going to be incredible. So you can say, I don't know, you could be playing one of the lesser teams that aren't going to make the playoffs and you could win comfortably at home. I don't know how much confidence that would give you. Now, if you play Philadelphia Union at home, you give a good performance. That's going to give you confidence regardless of the score. You get a result, all of a sudden it's like, hang on a second, we've just beat one of the teams that's potentially one of the favourites for MLS Cup. So that can give you confidence. So there's two ways of looking at it that way. And I just wanted to go back to something that we were talking about before. When you talk about a back three or a back four, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, you're going from 2 centre-backs to 3 centre-backs. That should make life easier for a centre-back. It doesn't. It doesn't. If anything, it confuses things even more, because I look back to when I was playing, and a lot of the times you would be playing in a 4-4-2, you'd be playing in a 3-5-2. You'd always be playing against 2 centre forwards.
Yeah.
So that was fine. So what you would find is that you would have 2 centre backs that would be marking 2 centre forwards, and you'd have the other one traditionally in the middle who's playing as a sweeper, and he's pulling the strings of the other 2. Now what you find in football, and this is where it can become a lot more difficult, is that as a defender, if you don't have somebody to mark, you will go and try and find somebody to mark. So when we look at, and we're talking about a completely different level now, but when you look at Manchester City, what they did 2 or 3 years ago when they played with a false number 9, they had no centre forward. They used to rip teams to pieces because centre backs would go and look for somebody to mark. So now if you find yourself in a situation where you're playing in a back 4, you have 2 centre backs, you know that at all times, one centre back is going to be marking, and then the other one potentially is doing the covering. When you play in a back 3 and you're playing against one up front, you've got 2 players that can potentially be doing nothing. So therefore, the structure then completely alters as well. So when people will talk about and say, well, yeah, you're going from a back 4 to a back 3, that gives you more stability through central defence. It does at times, but what it also does, you lose a man in midfield and you get overrun in midfield. Then a centre-back gets dragged out because he wants to go and help out. So all of a sudden, this back 4 to a back 3, when people go, it's just a simple adjustment, dependent on who you're playing against and dependent on who the players you have in your team. It's a huge adjustment for midfielders, and it's a huge adjustment for 3 of the centre-backs because their roles change even though you're just going from a back 4 to a back 3.
Is that where the zone, defending a zone may come into play? Obviously with the lone striker kind of drifting a bit, right? Kind of following play, moving side to side. Is there a situation where it wouldn't be just pulling one center back? It'll kind of be shifting depending on where the striker is on the field?
Well, this goes back to something we spoke about 5 minutes ago when you talk about senior players. When senior players are at the top of their game, they can control their game and they can control their teammates' game as well. Now, all of a sudden, you're talking about potentially 3 centre-backs playing against 1 centre-forward. Communication is absolutely vital. Because if not, if I'm the left-sided centre-back, I think my main centre-back's got him, and maybe the main centre-back thinks the right-sided centre-back's got it. So what happens is when a team isn't functioning as well as it wants to do, and like I say, and I can talk to this from experience, I've played in teams that have played with a back 4. We've all been full of confidence. We're near enough doing each other's jobs. We're near enough saying to our left back, the right back, the other centre back, this is where you need to go. Okay, I'll go there now. And that's when everything's great. But then you play with a back four or back three when you've got a team that's short of confidence. All of a sudden, you've got a back four of individuals, or you've got a back three of individuals. And that's where the point to where you're saying about Surridge. There's a lack of communication then when the ball's coming into the box. And I think at times what you do as a player, the worst times in my career, I overthought everything. And I overthought everything that I didn't even make a decision. Whereas when you are at the top of your game, you're in cruise control. You're able to monitor what's going on around you. You automatically go into that correct position. You can help the play. Yeah, natural instincts. You go into cruise control and you can help the players, your teammates that are around you that may be struggling a little bit with confidence. But what you're seeing at the moment is a team that's conceded 6 goals in the last 2 games. All 6 have been in the first half. So that affects your confidence. So all of a sudden it then becomes about, I've got to make sure I don't make a mistake. I've got to make sure I don't make a mistake. But collectively, then it can become a little bit of a problem, because if you're just taking care of your game and your teammate's just taking care of his game, you can end up looking all over the place. You can end up looking like you're open every single time on the counter because you're just concentrating on one specific moment. Whereas the teams that are doing really well defensively, Philadelphia Union is a prime example. You have defenders, whether it be right backs, left backs, centre backs, wing backs. You have players that are confident in their game. You have players that are confident in their defensive side, and you have players that are confident in the structure. So they can all help each other out. Whereas this New England team, I see a lot of isolation with players. I see a lot of 1v1s, 2 versus 2s. And that's something that needs to be rectified. But you fast forward 24 hours from now and you're going to the Philadelphia Union game. If you can have a good performance and if you can get a good result, all of a sudden that confidence just comes back to the players, and then you can grow from there. And that's one of the things, if you're New England, you're looking at it and going, let's try and get a win against Philadelphia Union. But if not, let's get a good performance so we can grow from that.
Yeah, actually, when we listen to the coach and we listen to the players, that's kind of what they intimated all week in practice. And I think it is a good point where, as a player, you think like this too, Danny. Like, obviously, they're aware of the past 7 or 8 games and that it hasn't gone great. But next up is Philadelphia. If you can put in a performance, if you can get in a result, and you can find that rally as a player heading into the playoffs, it really is a good spot. It's a good spot for where they've been to kind of have this 24 hours from now.
But let's be honest about what the Philadelphia Union are. You know, this is a team that only has 5 road wins on the year. They really haven't been all that special after Leagues Cup. I mean,
Well, they haven't dropped a point.
They haven't dropped a point, but they haven't had. You would have expected. There's a couple of games in there, and
they've had 2 wins and 6 ties.
Right, and that's where my point is that amongst those 6 ties, a couple of those should have been wins because they're home games where Philadelphia was favored to win, if you go through it. I think they're looking for a big performance this weekend because I think they have something to prove.
Well, yeah, I mean,
to solidify third place, because in order for the refs to get third place, they got to beat Philadelphia 3-0.
You could say 2 wins and 6 ties, but you can also say only 2 wins in 8 games. I mean, that's also a way.
Sure,
and
that's where I'm saying.
Yeah, so
on this final home game of the year, Philadelphia coming in here. Danny,
that's why it's a good test. That's my point.
And
it might be a good test, but Philadelphia. I think it's more of a test for Philadelphia this weekend. Because Philadelphia, I think
it'll be worse on them. Well, here's the thing.
With the way the East is structured right now, I think Philadelphia.
You think Philadelphia needs a bigger performance than the Revolution do tomorrow?
Going into the playoffs? Sure.
What?
Well, I think personally, I can see both sides of it. I think it's 2 teams that have equally feel like they have something to prove. New England needing to get back to basics.
Obviously,
needing to get back on track.
But Philadelphia also has higher aspirations for an MLS Cup this year.
If Philadelphia is to drop points, even if it's on the road where they haven't been great, if they're to drop points against a team that right now, let's be honest, I'm not thinking many people within the league are fearing the New England Revolution at this current time. If let's say Philadelphia goes out tomorrow and the Revolution beat them 2-0, 3-1, whatever it may be, a convincing win, I think that will affect Philadelphia as negatively as it would affect New England Revolution positively, if that makes any sense. Because it's a game they're almost expecting to win.
It is, but if you bring another team into it, the team that's just recently beaten you, Nashville, I had their game the weekend before against Philadelphia Union when they drew 0-0. And one of the things is when you speak to anybody associated with the club, spoke to Gary Smith, he said, we're just missing that sparkle at the moment. We just need something. So all of a sudden you have, and I'm not comparing the 2 teams, you have a Nashville team that was just going along. We know they've got an incredible defense, but they couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. If you spoke to the players and the manager an hour before they played you last week, and the fans, and then you spoke to the manager, the players, and the fans an hour after they'd beaten you, all of a sudden the optimism will have gone through the roof, because now all of a sudden you've got Sam Surridge. He's now scored 2 goals. They're now starting to score goals. So they find themselves with impetus, because it's like, this is what we needed to fix, and we've been able to do that. We're now scoring goals. So if New England get a result tomorrow, great confidence can be gained from that, because first of all, your home form, if you're able to get, the two of the 3 playoff games at home, all of a sudden, what that can do for you, you can grow from that. There has to be a starting point. And if you can get a result tomorrow, then I guarantee that fans, management, players, they'll be looking at things very, very differently an hour before the game compared to an hour after the game if they get a good result, because that's what football is all about. People will always tell you, you can tell a footballer that's enjoying his game is confident. And it's a result that can give you confidence. It's a clean sheet that can give you confidence. It's your star player scoring goals, your star player assisting. Then all of a sudden you get elevated again. And then instead of there being clouded around the playoffs, all of a sudden you start to see blue skies. And it's like, this is what we're all about. And at times it can just take one game to do that.
But what Philadelphia team is coming in here tomorrow, do you think?
I think it's a team that, because they have been, if I go back, there was a 9-minute period against Atlanta where they revisited Philadelphia Union 2022, where they scored 3 goals in 9 minutes just before halftime. It's not a team that's at the top of their game either. But what I would say is that regardless of anything, they are going to be one of the favourites for MLS Cup, because we know their home form, by and large, is incredible. We know defensively that they're very strong. One-off games, they can be great. They're a very good playoff team, as has been shown the last couple of seasons. So it's a team probably not at the top of their game. But I think if you're New England and if you beat them or get a good performance against them, I don't think that matters, because regardless of what happens in the result tomorrow, Philadelphia Union will still be classed as one of the favourites for MLS Cup. So for you to beat them, or like I say, get a good performance in the final game of the season, that's going to give you great confidence then going into the playoffs, because all of a sudden the manager will have his pre-game of his next game speech made up. He said, listen, lads, look at the performance you gave against MLS Cup finalists last week. Look at the performance that you gave. You might not have won the game, but you must get great confidence from that. Or it can be, look at the performance you gave against Philadelphia Union. You beat them. They were within seconds of winning MLS Cup last season, and they've got an outstanding team and are going to be one of the favourites this year. So don't lack confidence, because you've shown that you can mix it. And that's, I think, what the manager would do if they can get a good result or a good performance tomorrow.
Hey, Steve, quick, clip that and send that to the locker room.
Send that one to the locker room.
Let's go, Danny. Yeah. I want to get on the pitch right now. Let's go.
To summarize basically your thoughts, and I think that they're spot on, as expected, but it's a team that needs to go back to basics. It's a team that can turn things around in this final game.
They have an opportunity to,
because it's there. It just needs to be found. You need to find the basics. It could be turned around in one game. But you would agree, the Revolution need all the answers tomorrow. Like, this isn't something that they can get some of the answers tomorrow and then head into playoffs feeling confident. Like, you need to see everything kind of flip tomorrow before you head into the playoffs. Would you agree there, or do you think it's still something that can be worked on tomorrow and improved on in the playoffs?
I think you need to see improvement. I don't think there's any question of it. I think what you need to do, players need to have a good feel going into the playoffs. As simple as that, because a defeat is a defeat, a draw is a draw, and a win is a win. But there's been times when I was playing where you lost the game and you're like, wow, we shouldn't have lost that. And then, you're angry, you're annoyed. 24 hours when the dust settles, it's like, look what we can take from this, though. Look what we did better. Look what we did. We did this, we did that. So for me, it is what you have to do. You have to get this group of players, the starting 11 tomorrow, you have to make sure that when they go on that pitch, they're at their most comfortable possible, as in terms of playing in the specific positions. Know the game plan. know what they're trying to do, know what they're trying to eradicate from what's happened previously. And all of a sudden, if you get a defense that gets a clean sheet, it's like, oof, we've just closed down one of the best front threes in MLS. Then, if you're able to score a couple of goals, it's like, wow, we've just scored a couple of goals against arguably one of the best defenses in MLS. So it's about trying to get that balance right. What I would say is that you don't expect to come away from tomorrow's game and everything to be perfect. But if you have something that you can build on, so for example, you have to build on the 45 minutes against Nashville last week. That has to have been at the top of the second half. That has to be what you look at. The first 45, yes, you have to go through it and look at where you've gone wrong. But when you get to the business part of the week, it's like, right, look at these 45 minutes. Yes, Zimmerman went off, but you still scored 2 goals against the best defensive team in MLS. Now you then have to take it forward and you have to make strides that way. So it doesn't have to be perfect tomorrow. But what you want to do is start to see things starting to go right and starting to feel like it used to feel. Then the players can grow from that.
Let me ask you this, and you intimated this earlier about getting back to basics. From your vantage point, being a defender, going into tomorrow night's game, what do you think is the best position that Clint Pierre could put these players in? Is it a 3 again this week? Is it a back 4? I know it's difficult because...
Do you sit Vrioni again for a second week? Vrioni started on the bench last week, which is fascinating. We haven't even brought up Vrioni
I wouldn't do that either.
That's disaster.
Let's start with a back then. What puts them in the best position in your mind for success tomorrow?
Back 4.
Yeah,
it's a back 4 because I think we saw it last weekend. They changed from a back 3 to a back 4 at halftime. Looked completely better team. It's what the players know. You don't want, with all the goodwill in the world, you don't want Kessler playing right back. You want him in the heart of that defense. Now all of a sudden you can look and say, right, well, you've got Farrell back. You've also got Jones back. So there, you can do that with 2 fullbacks, and you could potentially give Jones a license to go even further forward and say to Farrell, listen, you just make sure that things are nice and comfortable at the back. But it's a back 4, and it's a system that all the players are suited to, I believe.
I would love to see that. Farrell has some experience playing right back. You can have him out there with Kessler and Romney in the middle, and then Jones on
the left.
That
left. gives you your best.
Because like you said, Jones loves to get involved in the attack. And but he's also very capable of tracking back. That was one thing that the Revolution have really, has been their bread and butter the last couple of years, is when he gets involved, and Brandon Bye used to love to get involved. They were highly capable of also tracking back and not leaving that gap for the center backs to fill in, or for some of the holding midfielders to really track back. So I'd love to see them get back to that. And you have the ability of having Farrell out there, where if you need, he almost slides in as that third center back that needed if Jones gets really involved in the attack, and to leave them not susceptible to the counter. So I would love to see that.
I want to switch to the other side of the field with you, because I think the Vrioni story is a big one here. Chancalaya has come in. He's done great. I think Chancalaya is also playing for a contract right now, so he's a little bit more motivated, because this is a loan deal, and there is going to be an open designated player slot next year when Gustavo Bo eventually goes. He has been a game changer. He has something to prove right now. I hope he keeps this energy in 2024. That's what the kids say. Keep that energy.
Keep the same energy.
But Giacomo Vrioni not starting last week in really what was a must-win game versus Nashville, staggering. That's for weeks now and for months I've been fighting that this has been a bust signing. And in a moment, and then we've debated, does it matter, the whole designated player designation, does it really matter at the end of the day? The guy that's making some of the most money on this team, especially when you look at his salary compared to Noel Buck's contract, it is so crazy that when you need him in a big moment, he's starting on the bench. He scored 2 goals since July. I mean, it's just, is it fair to say...
Well, none of the forwards have scored.
Sure, but he's supposed to be the leader of that forward tandem.
I'm with you, but it's across the board.
Sure, but he's supposed to be the leader of that forward tandem. He's supposed to be delivering goals for you right now.
He's also been subbed in and out. He also hasn't had a defined role, just like Danny has talked about.
But why don't they believe in him? If you believe in a player like that, you keep him out on the field no matter what. They can't even trust him to put him out on the field anymore. So what has gone wrong here?
It's a difficult one, because I think when I covered earlier in the season, people were starting to talk well about him. He was getting in on the goals and what have you. And one of the things that stands out to me compared with him and the other centre forwards, he's a player that will stretch the game. He's a player that will afford extra time and space for Carlos Heel. If Bo wants to drop a little bit deeper to go and link up with Heel, then Vrioni is a player that will stretch the game. Now, I've been thinking about the last few games. You could play Chankalai, you could play Vrioni, you could play Heel, and you could play Bo. It's very attack-minded, but you could do that because, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm having to go back quite a few games now. When I covered New England against Orlando, which was, like you say, June time, I'm sure New England played a diamond. And I think they look very effective.
No, I think
right
so,
now.
but I don't know. Those four players, and I've said this, we've said this on this show for weeks.
That is when they're at their best.
That's when they're at their best. I don't think we've seen, Danny, this is what another I don't think we've seen those four players on the field either at all or for any given stretch of time.
To bring up another point you made earlier, Carlos Heel is at his best when he's playing the 10. If he's tracking back and he's having to come back too far, you're limiting the ability for Vrioni to stretch the field and to open up that space because now he's covering so much more ground. And that's where you miss having Matt Polster as, your 6, distributing the ball to Carlos Heel, where he can distribute the ball out to Bo or to Chankalai, and then allowing Vrioni to find those gaps. And I think that's what's kind of being missed from a lot of the people calling for Vrioni's head is that his role as a striker is almost like null and void because they're not doing the things they're not able to do the things behind him to make him more important.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, with Carlos Heel and Vrioni, they have a good relationship on the pitch, have a good relationship off the pitch. And one of the things is when you have a player like Carlos Heel, if he gets on the ball and all of a sudden Vrioni's making the run, first of all, Vrioni's going to make the run because he knows that Carlos Heel's got the ball, and it gives Carlos Heel then another option. And people may say, well, yeah, all the plays that you've just mentioned, if you put them into a diamond, it's going to be very lopsided as in terms of the attacking side of things. Not necessarily, because if you have, three of your 4 defenders potentially would be centre backs, then you could have Polster, who for me is a very, very disciplined player.
Yes.
If you were to play a diamond, he could play the base of the diamond. Then you could have Chankalay on the left of a diamond. He could go and express himself. And then you could have someone like a K, or you can have Buck on the right of that diamond. All of a sudden they can do both. So all of a sudden you're looking and thinking, you know what, we've actually got a balance here of 5 defensive and 5 attacking. But like I say, this is the beauty of the conversation that we're having now. It's really easy for us.
Right.
It's really easy for us to say, well, you know what, this could work good or this could work well. And that's why it becomes a little bit more difficult for a manager, because it's not as easy as what we're suggesting. We're looking and thinking, well, if you get Vrioni, if you get Bo, you get Heel, you get Chankalai, you've got them all on the pitch at the same time. This is going to work for some magic. This is going to be brilliant. But as a manager, you have to weigh things up and you have to get that balance exactly right. Else all of a sudden, it's okay scoring 3 goals, but if you go and concede 4 or 5, then it sort of defeats the object. So I'm really interested to see what the lineup's going to be tomorrow.
Yeah,
I just think I can't believe it's taken till this last week after I
think back to the Barrero days, and that's kind of how. And when Bo was healthy and Barrero before.
No,
Barrero,
but we've been saying this for months. So why haven't we seen it? Why haven't we been able to see these players on the field yet?
It changed the system in mid-July.
Yeah, it goes back to
August.
Well, you know what? I think we're going to name this show "Back to Basics."
Back to Basics.
Back to Basics.
There you go.
Basics is the name of it, because I think that's what we all want to see. And Danny, we would be. I know we've taken a lot of your time. I got to ask you about the Premier League right now. Trust me,
I have my questions too.
Your boy,
do you really have to?
What's going on there? What's going on with Ten Hag? Is he losing kind of his way there, or what's going on?
I feel like, and it's something that I've said for a while now, Ten Hag did really well last year. Mourinho's been there, Van Gaal's been there, and it's like they're all good managers, and I think that's the concerning thing. My concern with Manchester United at the moment is that I don't think it matters who's in charge. I think there's so much that has to be changed at the club. You look at You look at the way the team's been brought together. You've got a collection of players from different managers. You've got a collection of different philosophies from manager to manager. Obviously, there's all the stuff behind the scenes as well that the fans aren't happy about. And it's trying to create this collective spirit within the team. But once again, I go back to something that we spoke about with New England. You look at Liverpool, the success that they've had in recent years. You look at Manchester City, the success that they've had in recent years. You've had a group of senior players that have been very, very comfortable with their own performance so they can help everybody else out. But when you look at this Manchester United team, they can see goals from set pieces. That's individuals switching off. That's individuals not taking responsibility. And that's because you're just so concentrated on your own role that you can then get caught up a little bit as in terms of not playing as a unit, as a team. And I think that's something that we've seen from Manchester United over recent seasons. And one of the biggest things I would say is that I don't know what the identity of this Manchester United team is. I go back years and years ago to, the great teams under Sir Alex Ferguson. You knew what they were trying to do after minute 4. Mm-hmm. Like now it's like they'll start well, then all of a sudden, like they did, I think it was against Brentford, they'll just concede against the run of play because they're wide open. So they need to have more discipline in the team, but they're still quite a long way off, especially when you look at what's going on ahead of them.
Well, that's what I mean. That's
so
what I've
much
seen.
Parity in the league right now,
and I've seen that too. Like when you look at the roster of Manchester United, it's one of the most talented in the Premiership. But soccer's the ultimate team sport. If everyone's just playing individually and you're not playing as a collective, which we've seen so far this season, the results are going to be what they are. But to what you just said, there is a lot of time left to hopefully correct that.
One of the games of the weekend is going to be Arsenal and Chelsea.
I knew you were going to bring it up.
Oh boy.
And
what a way to end the show!
I hate to admit that I'm a Chelsea supporter.
I'd be feeling good if I was you at the moment.
Oh, really? Would you?
Well,
yes, I would. I'm not the negative side of it. I'm the positive side of it with what Pochettino's doing. I really am, and I think, not saying they're going to, but I think they will create a lot of problems for Arsenal this weekend.
Okay, I like really that. Good. One of my best friends, a big Arsenal
Tommy's
supporter.
about to change his bet.
Well, here's the thing. With Chelsea, and I think a lot of people, they talk about the spending, they talk about the $1 billion that they've spent in the transfer market, but what they don't realize is they're not going out and getting the Erling Haalands and the Bellinghams. They're signing kids that they're basically pulling in for the future, and they've lost a lot of their leadership. They've gone through ownership issues, obviously, with what happened in the last couple of years. They lost sponsorships. There's been so much going on that they're essentially building for the future. So as easy as it is for people to pile on social media about Chelsea and their finish last year and how they didn't score their goal of the month, and I think in the month of September was a goal from training, that was kind of embarrassing. But I think you're right. I think that there is a future there, and it'll be exciting to see kind of how they develop over the next few months.
Well, one of the players that they picked up in the transfer window, not to cut Danny off, I feel bad, was George Petrovic, to bring it back a little full circle to MLS. Yeah. Was that a bad move for him to make this move over to Chelsea, where his thing was, I want to be starting in the Premier League, and he leaves the MLS as one of the best shot stoppers in the league, arguably the best shot stopper in the league at the time, and now he's playing behind Sanchez at Chelsea. Does it make sense that guy would go play? Granted, it's Chelsea. Sure, get the name, whatever. But it's also Petrovic, and Petrovic is worth a lot of money, no matter how much Chelsea was throwing at him.
He couldn't turn that down.
Yeah,
and I think I think you go back to your previous goalkeeper, Turner. He was going to Arsenal. He was never going to play. Now he's a number one in the Premier League.
Yep.
So with him going, with him going over there. Couldn't they make that
move in January? Couldn't you make that same move in January? Because Chelsea was going to be in the same spot no matter what. You'd still be stuck with Sanchez. Sanchez would probably be playing through most of the year. I mean,
it's. From a player's side of things, it's so difficult because what happens if, and you'd never want this to happen to a player, what happens if Petrovic would have got injured?
Correct.
But isn't that but this is what comes with playing in MLS. You sign up knowing this. Our season,
or not even injured. What happens if he gives up 45 goals.
Was
in 10
Petrovic
games.
Yeah,
really going to give up 45 goals, though?
Well, it's a hypothetical.
We
You
could play
don't
the
know.
hypothetical game here.
You don't know.
He could have easily.
This is why I'm trying. We've been saying this on the show. You bring it up every week. You just heard another
because it's one of-
personality say this.
played in the Premier League.
Who played in the Premier League? Like that deal was there. It's a $700,000 contract
Wasn't the best
for
deal for the
$17
team.
million.
Hang on.
Hold on.
I want to hear Danny's perspective from
for
this.
the team. It wasn't the best.
We've
deal.
heard your
just told you.
spiel about this for 2 months.
Oh no, I'm talking from the player's perspective.
Yeah.
Player's perspective.
I'm talking from the player's perspective 100%. I've forced through moves before myself, because I was looking and thinking, right, if this doesn't happen now, how do I know that it's going to happen in the next 6 months? I think from a player's side of things, it has to be the here and now, because there's so many players, and you'll read it in autobiographies, you'll see it on videos. You know what? Didn't make that move. Should have made that move. I thought everything was going to be all right. And then I had a bad turn of form. I got injured. And I just think Petrovic, and I've said this openly before, I see no reason why why couldn't he become number one at Chelsea?
He could. He absolutely could.
And that he's young. There's nothing to say that he won't. If he's doing well, and he'll get his opportunity. Yeah. Now, that could be in cup competitions, but he's gone there and he's like, first of all, it's Chelsea and it's in the Premier League. It's a team that are spending money. I love him, Pochettino. I think he's an incredible manager. Now, he goes there and it's like, if things don't work out, I'm probably still going to get a Premier League move.
Of course.
And that's one of the things. So you have to look at it from the club side of things. I don't know. I can't tell you anything about that. But from a player side of things, when certain clubs come calling, you have to go.
Yeah, and I think that's where he showed
what it is.
And he also showed his he was not happy after the Nottingham Forest deal fell through. And
how much of that has to do with Bruce not being here? Like, if Bruce is here, like, you're dealing with Kurt Adolfo at that point. Kurt Adolfo is the technical director that's making the decisions and is the one that's signing off on that
deal. That deal wasn't available when Bruce was here.
Sure, but I'm sure that, as Danny could probably tell us, these deals just don't pop up overnight. The $17 million from Chelsea probably didn't just pop up overnight. That was probably the first time that they heard that. I think there's a difference in the way of, it's very in the weeds here, but I truly believe that there was a way where Bruce would have figured out a way to keep George A here while also keeping these Premier League teams at bay, because he did it with Club Brugge with Tejan Buchanan. They did it with Turner. Like they let.
It wasn't that price tag though. That's what everyone.
But it was still over $12 million for Turner.
Right? I think it's there's two things. I think it's the price tag, because it's very good money, but I also think it's the fact of the amount of money that Chelsea is spending. Now you can say to Club Brugge, they could have come back and said, yeah, you know what, we'll wait for him. Chelsea, they could have gone, no, you know what, we'll go and spend 25 million on this other goalkeeper.
Right.
That makes sense.
And they're the things that,
but what about the Arsenal? What about the Arsenal holding off and letting the Revs keep Turner for that extended period of time?
Different club.
And he got hurt.
Because,
different club. But they were
it's a different club. And I think what you also have to remember is that, let me get this right, the Chelsea keepers from last season, did they, I know,
well, they had Mendy.
I'm not even too sure. Yeah.
They had Mendy, and then they had, oh my God, who came in after him? Because he had, everybody had.
Oh, because he's just gone, Kepe?
Yes,
Kepa?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Kepa.
So all of a sudden, but as far as I'm aware, they're not at the club anymore.
No, they're not.
So therefore you have to. If it wasn't going to be Petrovic, it would have been somebody else the next day.
Absolutely.
And that's where you have to look at it. And from a player side of things, 90% of the time, if a player wants to move, he'll get his move. It's as simple as that. Because there are ways which a player can be like, you know what, I need this move, I want this move. And I think New England Revolution, they were aware of that Petrovic, obviously the Nottingham Forest situation.
He said that move, Danny, before he signed his contract here. That's been known that's where he wanted to end up in the EPL.
Yeah.
That was said way before this.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, you keep him to the end of the season and then you allow him to go. But does that mean Chelsea are just going to go, it's okay, we'll just start with one goalkeeper? and then one a lot below. And if our first goalkeeper gets injured, then you know what? We'll just deal with things. But we'll come back and we'll sign you in January.
But that's where
I just don't think that's the case.
But that's where the loan deal comes in too, right? That's where I go. That's where I go. You know.
Yeah, but you're talking about months away. You're talking about going into November.
They need a keeper now.
They're 3 months into their season at that point. You know, if your first keeper goes down, and now you're what?
Listen,
SOL, you're bringing up a team.
If this is the first time you're watching or hearing our show, like we agree, Petrovic here, this team would be better. You don't.
Oh, he's incredible.
But
Yeah.
this is
phenomenal.
this is a business. This is what happens.
My focus and my ire, and I'll move on from this and we'll end the show. My ire just comes down to management. I wish management did a better job with that deal because I think at the end of the day, the second you sold him, you knew you were tossing in the towel on an MLS Cup run. Period.
I think it just breaks down to this. If Bruce is here, he has more influence on making a loan back deal. I don't think it would have ended up happening with Chelsea.
Me neither.
I think maybe it would have been somebody.
It's the club.
It's
the club.
But like you said, Chelsea is not going to sit back and be like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, hey, it's great.
But that's the business.
They're throwing money around
But Tom, again, you're talking about like the biggest deal. Is this the biggest deal in the Revolution history? Probably.
But let me ask, as somebody that has dealt with the Premier League business system, if somebody's going in at 20 million, right, and let's just say for the hypothetical of it, he does continue his form, like. Wouldn't somebody else, maybe it's not 20 million, but somebody else come with a high price tag at some point there?
But for the player,
the
player, I'm thinking that's a big risk. Let me ask you a question then, right? So they got $17 million for Petrovic.
That was reported.
Okay. Would you have preferred them to have got 8 million and they could have kept until the end of the season?
I still think that's a win. I still think that's a win. You paid less than $1 million for the guy, and I think they still would have figured
or less. It's a tough one, but you can see it from both sides of things. I see it from a fan's perspective, but I also see it from a player's perspective and a club's perspective, which is the situation that Chelsea were in. They were going round and they were buying everybody. And if they didn't happen to get one of them, it's like, okay, next stop.
Yeah.
Because they're completely rebuilding this team. If it was another Premier League team, I think it could have been another scenario.
I agree.
Where they had a manager that had been there a while, they had an infrastructure of players that had been there a while, but all of a sudden you've got a new manager. A new manager isn't necessarily going to want to wait months and months to get a keeper that could probably have to come in and play straight away.
Just that specific situation.
That's what the Nottingham Forest deal. Maybe they weren't ready to have.
Same thing with Tejan. It's just a different.
Let's say I don't know anybody. Aston Villa comes in.
Manchester United.
Yeah, they come in and they give you the same deal, but maybe they're not as. They don't need a keeper as desperately, and they don't. They're not the type of club that's going to go out and spend 30 million.
So we've done this on this. I need this on the record before we end this show. We've done this on this show
every week for like 2 months,
months and months and months. Again, no disrespect to anyone else. I think Danny he's on the show right now. I think he just laid it out the best possible way to hit your brain. Does it make
player perspective?
No, does it make sense?
It makes sense from a player perspective, sure, but I don't care what the player thinks. From the club perspective, I wish they pushed harder.
No. But does it make sense from the club?
From a Chelsea perspective, yes.
Not from a Revs.
From a Revs perspective, I wish they would have been more aggressive.
You're trolling. This is Tommy Trolls. You're trolling.
It's not Tommy Trolls.
It
is what it is.
Nope, you're trolling.
Last one before we let you go. Your thoughts on just the collapse of what has been with Bruce Arena and everything, like. Is this job an appealing job past 2023? I mean, you've laid out, they have the players. It seems like if they get one win, it could get, bounce everybody up in the right direction. But 2024, who's going to want to take over this mess?
It's a scenario where, New England, obviously, before I moved over here from England, it was a club that I was very well aware about as I was learning about MLS. So, yeah, 100%. And I think what you have to do as well, you have to look at the league, where the league is going. The league is growing so much, unbelievably. It's incredible to see the growth that I've seen in the 3 years. So to be a manager of an MLS club, I think 100%. 100%. So, yes,
it's
100%.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah, it is. It's opportunities, and I think opportunities are few and far between. And I can guarantee that there'll be a lot of managers around that are waiting for a job, whatever country that be. And that's the same all over the world. So for me, yeah, 100%. It's still a very attractive, a very appealing club. It's got a group of very, very good players, arguably one of the best MLS players, not just at the moment, but ever.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, I'm going to go back to the start of the conversation. For me, it would be half full rather than half empty, and there's so much to build on.
I like it.
But there's
Danny.
only one person consistently on the show, not pointing at anybody, glass half empty, and just wants somebody to agree with him. But we're glad that you are the voice of reason. And Danny, if you ever want to throw your hat into the ring about being the manager here in New England, you got guys that'll lead your campaign right here.
Let's go.
Perfect.
That's what our new thing is too. We bring on an Apple guest and
somebody-
say,
somebody-
you're going to come here and coach to fix this mess.
Well, because we like them, so
Yes.
it's easy for
Danny,
us to do that.
thank you for the
Thank
hour.
you for the time
Appreciate
today. I
it.
really do appreciate this. Danny's got to catch a
My pleasure.
Higginbotham. He is one of the voices on MLS on Apple, which you can watch the Revs and Philadelphia at 6 o'clock this weekend
Yeah,
for
early
free.
start.
Early start. I love that. I love that we went up to 6 o'clock. I hope MLS has more early starts next year. That's my suggestion. And make sure you watch the pregame show and also watch the Premier League on NBC every week. You can see Danny's analysis there as well. And Danny, we again appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again in the future.
My pleasure. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
All right, that does it for us this week. We're back next week.